Pete Parsons pulled off the psyop of the century, convincing Sony that Bungie was worth $3.6 billion. He afterwards proceeded to run the company into the ground, accepted all of his stock options, made the maximum amount of money he could, and then dipped and ran. This video from Bellular News gives us a full breakdown of everything that went down. Let's jump right into it.
Look, there's every chance you've missed this news, but basically it has been a long few months over at Bungie. I mean, just think about it. We've seen the marathon delay, the plagiarism allegations, and now, well, one of the lowest concurrent peaks for a Destiny expansion ever. And sadly for them, the mood is not improving whatsoever. Look at the subreddit and you will find a community that's all but given up. The reason why? Well, because they feel like the devs have given up too. But it might not be the resignation of developers. It might not be the community giving up. No, I think the most telling thing about Bungie's state is that the CEO resigned. Let's begin by looking at some numbers, and I know Steam player counts aren't everything, but they are something, and they don't look good for Edge of Fate, which is...
Oh, they look bad, and we've been watching them closely and talking about it, so it'll be curious to see what other people think as they evaluate the data.
The latest Destiny expansion. Now, part of that was the final shape giving people an off-ramp, right? The final shape is basically the big culmination of a plotline, so if you're going to duck out of the game, well, after that really is the best time. I mean, player sentiment was already low, and the state of Bungie, and of course the marathon debacles, did not help. But here's another problem. Only 22% of critics recommend the new expansion, which is absolutely brutal. And when...
Well, that was 22% at the time he recorded this video. Now we're at like 7%. Actually, let's double check what it is right now. Oh my God. It is down to 5% now. 5% of 404 users in the last 30 days are positive. Wow.
And it did release. Well, players found that the new portal system completely reworked the game. And let's just say it was controversial. So Bungie basically added a parallel power system, and as Paul Tassi frames it, this effectively sunsets 80% of the game. There was no point in engaging with anything outside of that system now. And that's because bonuses stack in a way that makes everything else almost irrelevant. Seeing the feedback, Bungie tried to fix complaints, but the fixes would have slowed progression even more, so they had to walk those back. And then, well, they had to come up with something else entirely. And all of this got worse, of course, after the QA layoffs of this summer. So the stuff in-game's been going bad, but I'd say, given the QA layoffs, it's hardly a surprise that in addition to all of that, there is a never-ending tide of bugs, errors, exploits, all that stuff. And for a peek at what's...
There's always bugs in Destiny 2, so I don't know if we criticize this too much. I mean, I look back at any time a new annual expansion came out, like Beyond Light, for example. Stasis was broken for a very long time, and you would think that after all these years of development, Bungie would get ahead of it, but it feels like as the game has more new content added to it, and with its spaghetti code, it's just every little thing is adding like 3 new problems. It's becoming seemingly more problematic with time.
What's happening? Well, look at this. Raid leaderboards that are full of cheaters. There's paid armor that turns players invisible. There's rewards not being granted, soft locks in multiple places in the game, and people losing access to paid content and stores, and the list of things goes on. And then came even more frustration because Bungie also seemed to remove aspirational loot from the reward pool. They seemingly made it paid instead. So that was a shit show. Of course, it's one they had to fix as well after a bunch of backlash. And, I mean, we haven't even talked about the Star Wars-themed expansion controversy in this video. So in short, right? It's been a bad time. And the man in...
Oh, it's been rough. This is the worst it's been since Destiny 2 Year 1, that's for sure. And that was, what was that, 2017, 2018? It's been a while.
Charge during the development of all of this just quit. But it's more than just that he quit. It's some of the context and also some of the incentives. Bungie CEO is gone. Pete Parsons gets to walk away from all of this chaos. Someone else can deal with the consequences of the company's actions during his tenure. In a blog post at the end of August, Parsons announced this departure. He had 20 years at Bungie, and he said that he decided to pass the torch. But the timing is kind of interesting. You see, he's leaving 3 years and 1 month after Bungie's acquisition by PlayStation, and that may just align with stock options maturing from that sale. And that's something clearly in the minds of the staff whom he...
Ooh, interesting. I didn't see this from Griffin. He said vested stock cleared, damage done. But hey, we're all family, right, Pete? Dang. This Bungie dev absolutely flamed him.
He fired. They reacted with barely disguised venom on social media. Say ex-social media manager Griffin Bennett had a particularly sharp response. He just said, vested stock cleared, damage done, but hey, we're all a family, right, Pete? You see, back in December 2023, insiders were worrying about something. They essentially thought the leadership at Bungie were preparing to cut and run after the launch of Marathon. Obviously, the launch of Marathon did not happen when anyone thought it would, especially at the time of those leaks. And what it looks like is that even if that was the plan, while Marathon may have been delayed, Parsons' exit was certainly not delayed in line with the game. So to understand this, let's go back to 2021. Staff framed Parsons as slow to act on toxic work culture allegations. They sent direct letters to him, and his intentions were supposedly good, better than some others of Bungie leadership, but ultimately, he didn't really react fast enough. But this was just the start. What followed next? Well, the multi-project incubation period that sapped resources, the sale to PlayStation, disastrous monetization demands being placed on the Destiny team. All of this stuff harmed developer and player sentiment, and I think most dangerously, it put players and developers against each other. And when that sort of thing starts to happen, game communities can just enter a death spiral. But then came the endless stream of layoffs both before and following the final shape. Because hey, congratulations, you did the final shape, people seem to have loved it, and your reward is already planned layoffs. Epic. Now add to this the woes of this summer, and just before that, the entire Marathon saga that played out.
To be fair, a lot of people criticized Pete and said that he should leave right after the layoffs, and that would have been the best time. And the fact that he didn't leave and he didn't actually make any meaningful changes really shows that he was just in it for the money. He knew that leaving would cost him probably millions of dollars, so he decided to stick with it, collect his fat paycheck, and then once he finally drained every last drop out of it, then he decided to dip out. Classic Pete, dude.
It's a lot. Now, look, to be clear, Parsons isn't directly responsible for everything that went bad. He's not the guy individually, unilaterally making choices about systems or skin implementation, right?
This is true. You should actually criticize the entirety of the team at Bungie, because when the team is, let's say it was at its most like 1,500 people, if there's bad decisions made, it's a collaborative effort, but the blame does go from the top down. It doesn't go from the bottom up.
Maybe he'll be a tiebreaker between some of his leads, something like that. But he exemplified the company culture. His decisions led to layoffs. Those layoffs left teams struggling. We know, as an example, struggling to run QA. So if you're a player finding, wow, there's a lot of bugs, what's going on here? Maybe that would have something to do with it. And with all that bad news, it's no wonder that Bungie couldn't retain experience. So, at worst, he is indirectly responsible for the company's state, but obviously, as CEO, yeah, he was responsible. But here's something. If Parsons is indirectly responsible for the company's state, what's curious is that his successor will not have the same role. Bungie's new leader is a man called Justin Truman.
The over-delivery guy. Listen, I've actually said this, and you can disagree if you want. I think that we should give everyone a fair shake now that he's stepped into a higher position of power. I'm hoping that like a year after he's been in power that we can see a meaningful shift in the tides at Bungie and in the direction of Destiny 2. If we don't, though, like I've said previously, then he is going to get the Pete treatment, as we call it around here.
And you might remember him from some of our previous coverage. We talked about his infamous GDC presentation on sustainable live service development. You might remember a quote, which is, "Beware of over-delivery." Obviously, Destiny players felt that they had been under-delivered to for quite a while, so it obviously fired away as a meme. It became kind of typical, an example of everything that people thought was wrong and going bad with Bungie. In reality, what he said in the talk was far more nuanced, and I guess the easiest way, albeit crude, is to just say, he was basically saying, don't blow your load. That's kind of it. Now, he actually engaged with the criticism of that meme when it came to accepting his new role, and what's interesting is that ex-staff weren't actively hostile to his appointment, which I think does suggest it could be a step up at least. But here's the thing, he is replacing Pete Parsons, but his new role is not that of Chief Executive Officer. He instead will be Bungie's studio head. Now, this may seem like some semantics, but I think it represents the most fundamental shift at Bungie in years. The reason why is simple. It suggests that Bungie's independence is ending under PlayStation. That's a threat that's loomed over them for a long-ass time. It's obvious that now it's coming true.
It would be interesting. I wonder if Sony now takes control of the majority of the C-suite within Bungie, basically meaning that like Sony makes the big decisions now and then it trickles down from there.
Even before Parsons announced his departure, PlayStation were closing in, and they weren't doing it sneakily. Sony CFO Lin Tao explained this to investors in early August, where he said, quote, "We have gone through structural reform as we announced last year." And then he added the crucial bit of information, quote, "This independence is getting lighter, and Bungie is shifting into a role which is becoming more part of PlayStation Studios."
Which is so interesting. It's so interesting to see the evolution of this deal that happened, right? Initially, it was Sony has acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion, but they get to keep their creative vision and creative control, which perplexed a lot of people because why exactly did you buy the company then? Like, what does that benefit you? And since then, we figured out that basically the reason why Sony decided to purchase Bungie was because they were basically the pioneers and the leaders in the live service video game development sector of video gaming. Like they took Destiny 1, which was a box service game, and they adapted it to Destiny 2 technically. And then Destiny 2 was box service and that was adapted to live service. And they did so very successfully. And the new meta for these big studios like PlayStation and Microsoft is to own as many live service games as possible. You see, live service games have created a vacuum within the gaming industry because once a live service game exists, it never technically ends once it gets to being extremely successful. They just continue to add new content, give new updates, new patches, give players new experiences. And once that live service game exists at the very top of its genre, it's going to be extremely hard for any other game to enter the space and compete, right? A good example of this is like in Battle Royale, right? We saw for a period of time Battle Royale games kind of pop up out of nowhere. Initially, it was like PUBG started to make some really big waves for themselves. And then, of course, Fortnite. And now Fortnite is atop of that mountain. And nowadays, you just don't hear about new Battle Royale games really popping up and doing especially well, right? And it's not for the lack of trying. I mean, other studios are trying to create Battle Royale games from time to time. They just launch and quickly fail because they can never amount to that incredible bar that has been raised from these live service games with these massive teams, hundreds, potentially thousands of people with an insane budget, an insane marketing strategy, and they've already copyrighted their IP and countless other mechanics in that game, which basically makes for a ton of like uncompetitive practices. And I'm not just talking about battle royales now. I mean, we could go into like the Nintendo stuff. Like they were just applying for different patents against Power World, where if a character summons another character, that's a trademark of Nintendo now. And once you own that trademark, right? Like when you throw a Pokeball or a ball and that summons something, when you own that, then any other game that tries to do that can be under copyright infringement and have to pay Nintendo millions of dollars or completely shut their game down in its entirety. So basically what's happening in the gaming industry is that it is a race to the top. It is a race to get a live service game in its particular genre with its own unique IP and massive audience, and then build a dev team around that with hundreds and thousands of people, get everyone and everything involved in it, all the content creators playing it, because once that's established, nothing will ever be able to exist in that space. And Sony is way behind in the live service market. They have like a couple good ones, like Helldivers is doing well. And so at the time when they purchased Bungie, they were like, this is the studio that's going to help us. This is the studio that's going to save us and help us develop more live service games. But as we found out with the launch of Marathon, Bungie has absolutely no clue what they're doing. Pete Parsons literally pulled off the psyop of the century, convincing Sony that his company is worth $3.6 billion because of all the other incubation projects that they were working on that are all flops. Pete's storied journey inside Destiny alone is of somehow him magically failing upwards. Destiny 2 and Destiny 1 is the dead game that just never seems to fully die. Bungie was not the studio to purchase for $3.6 billion if you wanted to actually understand how the live service market works.
So integration is proceeding. The independence of Bungie is going away. And obviously, this followed the 2024 restructuring, where PlayStation moved 12% of Bungie, which is 155 roles, directly into SIE, which is Sony Interactive Entertainment. Those people then formed Team LFG, and they're currently working on a live service MOBA, which is one of the things that came out of Bungie's incubation period. Anyway, they also formed the Creative Studios team supporting live service development, which obviously makes a lot of sense when you know that PlayStation really wanted those live services. Now, before that, well, Sony's incoming CEO visited Bungie, and when he did, he praised the staff, but he said there was, quote, room for improvement. Not necessarily on the staff. No, his room for improvement was specifically regarding business expenses and accountability for development timelines. Certainly sounds like a bit of a threat. And those are the types of failures that staff are not responsible for. They're the sorts of things management is responsible for. And now, Bungie has no CEO. The leadership will report directly to PlayStation. And it's a PlayStation that's different, one that is shifted towards cheaper, faster game development with more central oversight, because they essentially realized, oh dear, we put a lot of chips into Concord, and we really didn't monitor the quality of that, did we? So you might be wondering, is this better for Bungie? It's weird, right? Because we don't know, you don't know, none of us know, because, the future hasn't happened yet. And also, game development has a lot of lag time. Parsons left at the end of August, but we're still going to feel the impact of his leadership, I suppose his and his team's plans, for a long time. Now, if we're to assume that Truman has the best of intentions, which I am happy to do, well, it's also the case that he's likely under a hell of a lot of pressure, because he now needs to deliver change for both Destiny and Marathon, both of which are extremely embattled. And he's working with a studio that is now bled of its senior talent via multiple rounds of layoffs, and also dealing with fans that are rightly not happy and rightly not trusting. Meanwhile, production patterns and product offerings keep on changing. Look at the different iterations of seasonal yearly content that Destiny has had. Look at how Marathon is being forced to change by a market that, well, is, I think, quite literally demanding change of it. Though, of course, none of this will be news to Truman, because he's been the Chief Development Officer since 2022. Before that, he was Destiny's General Manager, and he switched roles right as the chaos began with the Lightfall expansion. He's been part of the decision-making since then, and he still is now. So the question is simple. Do he and PlayStation actually have a plan? At the very least, PlayStation can be pleased about something, and that's licensed revenue from Destiny Rising. What's Destiny Rising? Well, it's a mobile game with gacha elements, so yeah, it's bringing in the money.
Are they getting royalties from this, or did they just sell for 100 million and get a one-time check? That's what I'm curious about. I wonder if they do incur royalties.
And as we've covered, that's where a lot of the industry's money comes from now. And by most accounts, NetEase used their blank slate with making this Destiny spin-off game actually quite well. They supposedly made a passable Destiny campaign. Players were satisfied enough until, of course, they hit the end game and the gacha and power and all of that began to rear its head. But still, it brought in some happy numbers. PlayStation will like that. And PlayStation now treats Marathon as their investor marketing centerpiece. We see that from recent accounts of them saying that things have improved with the game, talking about features added like proximity chat, that the mission system rewards players better, that the UI and UX has got significant improvements, that they've, of course, removed the plagiarized art. All of those things to rehab its image and, again, tell the investor story that they need to tell. But there is a simple enough fact. Marathon will arrive late to the extraction shooter party. You see, both Escape from Tarkov and Arc Raiders will hit their own version 1.0's first. But when Marathon arrives, it may have a shot of success. Bungie can still deliver cool things from time to time, undoubtedly. But the problem, Bungie will deliver Marathon under, to be charitable, let's just call them unenviable conditions, just like they have with Destiny. And when you look at Destiny right now, you do see that it ain't working. The future of Bungie then? Well, in theory, more PlayStation engagement means more oversight. So if you miss your development targets, yeah, you're not reporting to Pete Parsons who can spin it to Sony. No, you're going to be answering to PlayStation directly. The same goes for missed revenue targets. And if that leads to more layoffs with the same delivery expectations, then Bungie will just have to face the worst of all worlds. One where they can only be punished, where the fruits of their labor will be privatized and, they'll get laid off if something doesn't go well. The sorts of mercenary decision making we've seen from a lot of these companies. But if we're trying to stay grounded and stay with the perspective that most people are the hero of their own story, that are, at least through their own narrative, actually trying, well, we can think about a statement from Totoki to investors. The one basically of Bungie devs always having had talent and always wanting to deliver for players. He could see that. And a lot of the sort of veiled or not so veiled threats from PlayStation, they were always about management. And when you look at some of the other big games, yeah, Sony does seem to have a better handle on what a quality video game is, for all their faults, than, say, Microsoft does. It seems the failure of Concord truly shocked PlayStation into waking up, honestly, and that seems to be what has made them completely okay with delaying Marathon, which I'm sure the older PlayStation wouldn't have wanted to do. Certainly the PlayStation that looked at Concord and thought, absolutely, we'll yeet that one out. I'm sure it'll go well. We're PlayStation. Look how photoreal these characters are. The gamers and the people will love it. So in the good timeline, we get a PlayStation that holds leadership accountable, that stops Bungie leadership hiding behind their company's somewhat greater than average independence within the PlayStation roster of studios. If that accountability is there and the incentives are aligned, then maybe there is hope. Maybe Bungie can catch their breath. Maybe even they can take the time to rebuild. Doing that will be hard, and the likes of Destiny is a live game with a profoundly disappointed player base, one whose cynicism does feel rational and does not feel jaded, because they've genuinely had a very goddamn bizarre time. This story's basically been game development where so much of everything goes wrong. But if you want to see the literal opposite of that, a game free from so many of the things that just, be it indie, AA or AAA, just kill projects, watch this video next. It's about Team Cherry, and I think you'll really like it.
All right, there it is. That was The Leaks Were True, Bungie CEO Cuts and Runs. It was a great video, and he actually got all the facts correct. It is nice to see, as someone that's obviously an insider and reports on Destiny 2 news very frequently, it's nice to see people who, maybe don't play a ton of Destiny 2 actually do the proper research and understand the full context of the situation, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But this was exactly right. This was spot on, exactly what's happening. And I was actually in the works of developing a lengthy script talking about Pete Parsons' PSYOP of the century. That was the title of the video. And I still will probably make that video go live because it didn't quite hit exactly every note I wanted to talk about, but he did actually hit on a ton of really good notes. I just think that there's a even bigger story to be told here, which is just the one where Bungie makes a ton of money during COVID because of the massive rise in revenue. They take that money from COVID and they begin to develop these incubation projects. And because of the hype and the momentum they have from live service and how much money they're making, they're able to go to Sony and convince them that their evaluation is the equivalent of $3.6 billion, which is just crazy. I mean, they're nowhere near actually worth that much money. But because they were able to convince them of that, they were to get that acquisition, make an absolutely insane amount of money. I mean, we know that Christopher Barrett alone, who has had a bunch of his money taken away from him due to SA allegations, he's owed something like $80 million. So basically, simply put, Pete Parsons probably made like $100 million from the Sony acquisition. He convinced Sony that Bungie was the kings of live service and that they had it all figured out, that they were working on and cooking all these live service games and that they were about to blow up in the biggest way possible. They were about to take over. And instead of launching all of their successful live service projects and absolutely dominating the gaming industry, they decided to work with Sony and let them purchase them for $3.6 billion again. So that way Sony could profit and benefit and actually stand a chance at competing against the massive juggernaut that is Microsoft. But instead of Sony being Batman and hiring, Team Robin to take on the juggernaut that is Microsoft, like we've mentioned before, unfortunately, in this situation, Batman got bamboozled. And basically, they just hired a dumpster fire to go with them in this war that they're waging against Microsoft. And so, in my opinion, even though Sony did get burned for $400 million from Concord, I truly believe their biggest loss in investment was the acquisition of Bungie. I don't know what Bungie's current day evaluations would be, but I would be willing to guess or estimate myself using numbers that I have completely made up at this exact moment in time that they probably lost like $1 billion from them, considering how Bungie's reputation has gone down the drain, considering how all of those incubation projects completely fizzled out and turned into dog shit. And even the one that was like meant to be the big one and help Sony so much in the live service market was Marathon. That turned out to be the biggest burn of all. The only saving grace, the only silver lining for Bungie at all is that Destiny cannot die. This is the undead game. No matter how much shit we go through, no matter how poorly Bungie develops it, no matter how many bugs or problems or terrible decisions they make, the Destiny community is addicted and loyal, and we will continue to play this game from now until the end of time, apparently. And I really want to tell that whole story. I want to talk especially about Pete Parsons and his mastermind strategy. So make sure to look forward to that video. It'll be out here in a few days or a few weeks. That's a wrap on this one, though. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. We'll see you in the next one. Later.